Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Marketing. My name is Kim Britz, executive coach and trainer and international leadership facilitator and host of the Lunchtime series, where we add value to people's lives every day at 12 o'clock on ebuzzradio.com. Today, we are chatting to someone who is going to tell us more about how to write a book and self-publish in 90 days. Please welcome author, speaker, and business owner, Grant Senzani. Grant, how are you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for making the time. Lunchtime Marketing is all about sharing useful information and ideas out there with people. So don't you just want to give us an indication of who are you, what do you do, and sort of some background about you?
Oh, perfect. So ideally, I'm what they call a dreamer. I set up dreams in my mind and I say, okay, Grant, how can we go and unearth this dream and create a reality out of it? That's really who I am at the essence. I am a co-founder of a company called the Golden Goose Institute, and we delve into authoring, the author coaching, which is before you actually have a physical book, and then obviously publishing of your book as well. And then I'm a life coach as well. So we also dabble in that as well via self-development and communication. So those are the things that I do. I absolutely love where I'm at in life as well. So I'm really looking forward to obviously the conversation at hand as well.
That's fantastic. So in terms of the books that you've written, so, the topic of discussion is how to write a book and self-publish in 90 days.
Yes.
I've been down this journey where you kind of go, yeah, I want to write a book. I want to tell people about, I have had some really interesting things and moments that's happened to me, and some really great successes. But it's really, I don't know, I've eventually got to a point where I was like, I don't know how to put all this together.
Yeah.
But thankfully, for the Lunchtime series, I have really great conversations with people. So this Lunchtime series, and we do from leadership, from coaching to marketing to storytelling, all of it is going to be compiled in a book. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Nice.
But I want to, what I do want to pick your brain is a lot of people out there kind of go, okay, so, but what do I do and how do I do this? How do I start?
Okay. So how one normally starts when they are looking to approach a book is that you sit down and you ask yourself the question, what problem am I solving? What problem am I looking to be of a solution towards? And within each and every one of us, if we look hard enough, we'll actually figure out something that we've had a pain with. And we decide, you know what, if I knew this 5-10 years ago when I started this, then this is what I would have done. And somebody out there, I believe you not, is definitely waiting for that type of advice as well from you. So it's sitting down and saying, what is the problem that I want to solve? And you want to solve a problem because people normally start off from a place of what are you solving to actually then buying into your solution. So first things first, what problem do you wish to solve? That's the first thing that every single person who wants to write a good book has to first figure out.
Yeah. And okay, so I have the solution and I say, okay, cool, this is the problem I'm solving.
Yes.
What then? Because
Okay.
you're kind of going, one day when once upon a time I was, I was 15 and this thing happened. Do I tell stories? Do I just write a bunch of information? Do I research?
Oh, I love it.
Is there a bit of way that we can structure it? I mean, how do I do it?
Perfect. So this is what ends up happening. As soon as you decided, okay, I know what my problem is, the next thing is you sit down and say, oh, great, what is the one-line solution of that specific problem, right? So now you've got your problem and then you've got your solution right under that. Then from there, we then stipulate what we call a golden thread. Now, what a golden thread entails is also how you communicate naturally. So in my case, for instance, there are four types of ways that we communicate. You either communicate as an inspirational individual, and that's somebody who has a lot of stories, and has this thing of they just want to uplift somebody from a idealistic point of view. If you are in the slums and you finally want to pick yourself up and do something extraordinary, inspirational books are usually the type that will do that. You also have your persuasive books. Now, your persuasion is now linear kind of thinking. If I walk into a store and instead of buying a VW, somebody convinces me to buy a BMW, I'm still talking about local transport, being, automobiles, but I have not really changed my thinking. So to come back to what we were discussing just now, If you're thinking of inspiration, then what you're doing is that you're saying, instead of you driving, how about you start using airplanes instead? That's what inspiration is. Persuasion is saying linear thinking, same solutions. All I'm saying is that I just want you to think differently because you can get a different outcome. Then you look at your informing, and informing is now sitting down textbook-like and going through the ones and twos one after the other. Robert Greene is very good at that. His books really are about that informing. And then the last bit is, now we've got your persuasion, we've got your informing, and then we've got your inspiring. We've also got what we call your entertaining. And that's just really saying, how do I shift your mood from here to here? So a book like, for instance, Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, that is really an emotional story, taking you through different emotions, but still delivering a message to you. Now, all of us will definitely pick one as a major theme, and then we'll pick another one. So in my case, what I love to do is I love to persuade, and I love to inform. So I'll say, okay, great. So if I decide that, for instance, a problem that I would love to solve, or maybe I should ask you, what problem would you want to solve? Let's start there. Let's make it as practical as possible.
So I think for me, it's about self-sabotage. Because it's such a big question that comes up in so many of my coaching clients, and I think people often think that successful people don't have the self-sabotage kind of button, and they don't have that applies to only certain people, and that's not the case.
Yes.
I think people often go through it. I think it's a thing that most people struggle with. So I think for me, it's about I would tackle that directly. Self-sabotage, yeah.
Self-sabotage. So we have now a problem, and our problem is self-sabotage. And in one sentence, what would you say would be a solution for self-sabotage?
Know yourself.
No. Boom. So now we've got our solution. And next thing, we now sit down and we say, okay, what's the golden thread here? So in your line of communication, when you're speaking in front of an audience or when you're speaking to your clients, do you look to inform? Do you look to inspire? Do you look to persuade? Or do you look to entertain?
I pretty much probably do all of those. Yeah.
Definitely.
From doing a lot of training in my life, you kind of have to be able to speak a variety of or deliver a variety of offering.
Yes.
Because sometimes when you're informing, it doesn't land with people who like entertainment. So when you're keeping it across the board and you're kind of going, how do I add all these elements to my information? I think it lands for a broader audience.
100%. In this case, however, and I do love what you say, because we all would actually use all four elements, but we tend to almost lead with two. So from your natural communication style, from what I'm actually gathering as well, I'll definitely say some persuasion is definitely part of that. And with coaching as a whole, I'd also look at it and say, great, if you're coaching, then I'm guessing informing the individual to actually move in a certain direction through a variety of questions would be obviously the ultimate goal here, would ensure that somebody moves into a different direction as a whole, if I'm not mistaken. So we've got the problem. The problem is that people self-sabotage. And like you said, this is not just us. It's everybody that is big, huge, has done very well for themselves. We all have that element within us. But the solution to that is to understand who we are, to know thyself. So what I would do with my golden thread is to say, to persuade and inform people who tend to self-sabotage to know themselves. And it's really that simple. Now, we could obviously make it more succinct and tie it up even better, but basically that's what you're doing. Yeah. So from there, now we get into the meat of the subject. We say, great, now I know where my book is going. If they read chapter 1 all the way until chapter 20, this will be the golden thread within. I won't be able to lose my audience in the sense of the reader. Because sometimes we do read books and I'm like, what was the purpose of this? In this case, that won't be the case with your book, because you finally have that golden thread. So now I sit down and say, great. So what are the causes of self-sabotage? And you'd probably list, I always challenge people in our workshops to list at least 15. And once you have those 15s, I sit down and go, okay, great. Now you've got your 15 causes. What I want you to do next is that I want you to now write the solutions to those specific causes. And what I want you to do is maybe sit down and write about 4 of those solutions for every single cause.
Yeah.
So essentially what ends up happening with this golden thread is that you realize that your causes are actually what your chapters are, what they entail, and your solutions would then be the subtitles within those specific chapters.
Yeah.
And if you have that in front of you and you consistently begin to thread it out, what ends up happening is that the stories are easier to flow with. So you actually find out things like writer's block becomes a thing of the past, because now you actually have a roadmap, and your roadmap makes sense as well, not just for you, but also for your reader. This will take you probably about a week to really sit down and put together succinctly. And then thereafter, it's about sitting down and then writing. Yeah. And there's also a magic within that as well. You can stop me at any time because I can go on.
No. My brain is like running away with me right now. I'm kind of going. It's such a beautiful way of how you've structured this, because essentially, when you have that, it's never occurred to me because I'm new to this. So, that one-liner, when you kind of go, is that golden thread one-liner kind of fitting into what I'm speaking about in this chapter?
Yeah.
And if it isn't, how do I tie it back to why I'm sharing this information? Because like you say, half the time you end up writing information.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell was that book about? I don't, how did that help me? Or what was the writer actually trying to say, right?
100%.
So then you start writing. Is it a case of going, okay, I need to set it up in my diary. I need like 7 to 8 at night, or I need to commit to it like that. I think a lot of people, when they from an entry point, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience, from an entry point, it's the discipline and the commitment that you need to get to sit down and sit there and write this stuff.
Yes. And this is true. This is very, very true. So usually people will go around it 3 ways. The first thing that they'll do when they begin writing after doing the golden thread is that they'll decide to start typing it word for word, and then they'll have this relationship with the backspace button every now and then, so they move forward, but they're moving back, and they're moving forward and they're moving back. And what you realize after like an hour or so is that you've got 500 words in front of you, but you're tired and you're wondering, where did this fatigue come from? That's the first way. The second way that people would obviously want to do it is what I call sprinting. And I think that this is something that you absolutely have to do if you want to make headway as fast as possible. Because your first manuscript, believe it or not, will not be perfect. And the point is not perfection. The point is always progression. What you realize over time is that what ends up happening towards the end is that your book finally begins to alleviate and all of those gems begin to rise to the surface. But you've got to find the dirt first. Yes. And this is what happens when we start with this thing called sprinting, where we'll sit down and we'll look at our computer. We'll say, let me give myself about 10 minutes. And all I'm going to do right now is just type as fast as possible. I'm going to divorce myself from the backspace button. We don't have a relationship here. So that does mean that your word processing system is going to look at you and swear with you with these red marks and green and so forth. But that's not the point. The point is to say, I need everything that is inside the right side of my brain, which is the creative side, to be on paper. I want all those ideas to jump onto the page. Then your left side of the brain will later come on, which is our analytical side, that will then sit down and say, okay, what were the gems here, and begin to draw those out. Now, what we've seen within our workshops is that when somebody does this, what ends up happening is within an hour or so, where they would have had 500 words when it comes down to just typing and backspacing, in this case now, because you're only engaging one side of your brain, you then have at least 1,000 to 1,200 words.
Yeah.
And that for me is phenomenal, because what it tells you is that the words are within you, but you just need the right structures to actually play within. So that's the second method. The third method is now this thing called transcribing, which I personally would give anybody and everybody to do. A quick exercise. If there's an app called Live Transcribe, and what this app does is that if you have your golden thread right in front of you, right, all you're doing, remember, because you've already done the big bulk of the work, you've got your foundation. So you're looking at this specific golden thread, and then you're looking at your Live Transcribe, which you've downloaded. I know it's on Android. Apple users, I'm so sorry. We're still yet to find something for you. But what essentially happens now is that all you need to do is speak this book into existence. So now you start talking, and this app is getting these words one by one. And with the same hour, right, if you obviously have the energy for it, because that is a task of its own, you could actually form about 3,000, 4,000 words within that. So
Yeah.
this is typically how you would move from just the ideal all the way until you finally see words onto your page. And then you sit down and you go, okay, great. What was my measurements? If 1 hour was 500 words in concern with me with this relationship with my backspace button, would that be ideal, or would I move into maybe sprinting and edit later, or should I transcribe my book, right? And either one of these would work for you. Personally, I've heard people that have said no, would prefer to have a relationship with the backspace button. Personally, I reprimand that, but I hear people are different, so I respect that. Personally, I do a mix between transcribing and your sprinting as well. And that allows me to now, if I'm doing a 30,000 page book and I realize, great, Grant, you seem to do about 2,000 words when you transcribe, then that means that will take me about 15 days to ensure that I get my first manuscript out of me. If it's 1,000 words that I produce per hour, then I realize, oh snap, that means that this is going to take me a whole month to finally get my first manuscript. And really, that's how it's done.
I think that's such a useful sort of strategy to use. I think what I have noticed is from going down this road, and that backspace button is. Half the time you eventually start typing and you kind of go, oh, like none of that sort of applies to me right now. Let me go back. And it becomes a time waster. So not only does it become debilitating, but you kind of go, oh, this is taking forever. Yeah. Right. And when you sprint through it or you transcribe it, suddenly you have more to work with. So it's all out of your head onto a page. Yeah. What I'm, from doing these lunchtime sessions, I'm doing a lot of transcribing as well. So a lot of it's going on page. And strangely enough, from the first transcription that we've done, out of one video, we had 18 A4 pages of one video. Nice. No, so it was a lot of conversation. So we've kind of collated that and kind of got back to what is the messaging, what do we want to say, what are we breaking it down to. So I mean, I think that's such valuable lessons to share with people. But okay, so now we within 15 days we could how much could we possibly do if we do follow this method? You mentioned we could have enough chapters to sort of release a book.
Definitely. So what would happen is as soon as you're done with the first manuscript is I always say definitely go back and look through. Obviously, there's a time where we are creative, we're using our right side, then there's a time when we use our left side. Once everything's on page, we then go back and say, okay, great. Now let me deal with my left side and begin to get those gems out. So for instance, in your case, you have 18 pages of words that you've obviously transcribed. So in this case, all we do is we go back and we say, but where were the points here? What are the highlights? What are things that I believe would definitely add value towards my reader? Because not everything will. Yeah. And once you take out those points, that's the first edit you do by yourself. Once you've taken out those points, you go through it at least a second time. And if we do this within 2-3 weeks, it means that the fourth week, you're just going through your work consistently. You're already done with your first manuscript that specific month. Then we move on to the next thing is when we sit down and we find an editor that will then edit our work. Now, depending on who you find, they should take at least a month, depending on how big your book is. My personal opinion is that because I'm a self-published author and I teach people also how to do exactly the same thing, we find that the reason why most books are thick is not because of the information that's inside them, right? Most of the time, these books go into a bookshelf in a bookstore. And the only way that I can notice a book is if I see that it's a thick one. So that was usually the thing behind having big books. It was, we want our books to be seen. It wasn't the information at hand. And if you distill the solution, for instance, in your case, or the golden thread, is that you're looking to persuade and inform somebody who has self-sabotaging tendencies to finally know themselves, right? That in itself is just a one-liner. So when you sit down and you finally put these things into words, you don't need a huge book. I personally say, guys, aim for about 30,000. Then again, people also don't have all that much time. So what you want this person to do is to read your book as fast and as soon as possible, feel empowered, and go in and start living a life where they're not self-sabotaging. Yeah. So you want to make that book as fast and as soon as possible. So I'd say 30,000 words, you're good to go. 15 ideally. But some people would obviously argue the point, is it really a book then? And I would say, yes, it is. It still is a book. The point is, at the end of the day, is to make sure the person who's reading your book is better off. It's got nothing to do with the author and our egos to say, I wrote a 1,000-page book. The point is, how do I help the person who's going to read this book? So we're done with the first manuscript. It's in editing for a month. Once that editing is through and you're obviously having back and forth with the editor, the third month is when you finally go in and get it printed. Now, during the editing phase, because we're done with more or less the manuscript and the words and so forth, we're now looking at, hey, let me get a cover. Let me get that done. If I need to send it out for reviews, let me do it within that month. The third month is now collating everything and finally talking to your printers and getting a book out there. So that's really how the process works. It's a very fast and simple process. I think sometimes we just daunt ourselves with the whole thing of, can I really do it? And I think that really stems from the fear of what will people think, and also your self-doubt to say, do I have the capability? And if you can answer those two questions, I'm sure your book will come out much faster. I know people who have like written about 100 books plus. When you talk about people like John Maxwell and so forth, and I used to wonder, how do you find that much time? I wrote my first book in about 2 years, and that's when I sat down. I'm like, no, there's a problem here. Someone has 100 books. If I wanted to do that, that's 200 years that I need, and I don't have that much time. So how do they do that? And it's exactly the same thing.
I find it so fair. I'm like inspired to start writing a lot more, right?
Good.
So in terms of before I go to the next question, I just want to end off. So we find a printer and then we kind of go, cool, I've got a book printed. Is there an easier way or an easy process to get your book on Amazon or online? Is there an easy way to do that?
Oh, definitely. And I would also say with anyone who is a self-published author or looking down that route, you have to get your book onto Amazon. Now, I know that there are different sites. I know Android does have one. It's called Play Store or Play Books. Yeah. And I also know that your iPhone users definitely have their own as well. But definitely go to Amazon. Amazon is the biggest bookstore in the world right now. And what I love about them and admire about them is that once your book is out there or up on their platform, number one, your rights are protected. So that means that I can't steal your book, take your information, and just copy and paste elsewhere. I've seen some authors on their websites have a PDF electronic version of their book. Yeah. Now, what this ends up doing is that when I decide to download it for whatever amount, I can just give it to anybody else. There's no protection around that. Whereas with Amazon, as soon as you download your book into your Kindle, that's your book. I can't transfer it to anybody else. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Amazon is big enough to actually print your book without you being part and parcel of that process. So if somebody's in the States, somebody's in the UK, somebody's in Asia, they simply press a few buttons and Amazon prints the book on your behalf, hard copy. Yeah. And you just sit down and collect the check. Now I will also be honest that this is not as an easy process, because building an online presence, does take time. Yeah. So you need to take that into consideration. But definitely put your book on Amazon, and it's very, very easy. Very, very easy. It's not as hard as we always portray it to be. And remember, now when I Google your name, I see published author and I see Amazon there. Already I'm thinking, this guy is credible. I ought to deal with him sooner or later.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and I love the way when you mentioned check, I'm going, yeah, that's exactly why I'm doing this. It's a part of what I spend a tremendous amount of time researching and finding information and sharing information and doing training. I facilitate leadership programs. There's so much that I'm busy with all the time. And when I'm doing this, I am part of what I'm doing now is because we have a lot of online stuff is I'm recording what I'm doing.
Yes.
So that I can still take that and use that information and still put it in a book from what I've researched and found. And so, and essentially you want to be able to monetize that.
Definitely.
So in terms of monetizing, so is it effective? Is it an effective strategy? I know like you're saying, it's credible. People are saying, oh, wow, I definitely want to deal with Grant. He's got a whole bunch of books out and he teaches people how to do this. Does it make money?
That's a brilliant question. How honest do you want me to be on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm completely honest. Like I'm all for honesty.
So one of the things that we get from also people that we're onboarding as authors, they're like, I want to sell 1,000,000 books. I want to become a bestseller. And I usually go, great. But the philosophy here is that your book is not something that you want to sell. Your book is something you want to leverage into something much larger. So we don't make money from our book. We make money because of our book.
Ah.
Makes sense. So where the real money is at the end of the day is when you sit down and you finally have a system behind it. So I love what you were talking about when you said you're into training, you've got your coaching, because what happens when you now develop a book is that you are coming in from the expert point of view already. You're not developing an idea and finally becoming an expert. You're already saying, I already have done this before. I have people who are paying for my book. So it's just a matter of me just getting a wider reach. So what you end up doing with that book is you sit down with somebody who's a potential client. The book might cost them 200 upfront, right?
Yeah.
But what you take home with you would be whatever fees that you charge going forward. And that for me means that there's a whole upsell in that regard. So if you look at a graph, for instance, you'll find that the first product that anybody comes up with is information. So you and I will sit down and we'll create information. And that information won't sell that much because information is everywhere. It's just maybe how you put it together. So that's why a book is essential. But a book will probably sell, let's say, 200 to 300 grand. And that might not pay your bills completely.
Yeah.
So you need to sit down and say, great, what's the next thing that I need to do? Maybe I need to create a service where I can walk hand in hand with this individual. And that's where training, talking, and coaching come into play. So you need to sit down and go, with this book that I have, how am I going to ensure that I leverage the opportunities to start selling those end products? And within the book, you need to develop that relationship with that individual from the onset. So you need to be very focused and very, very knowledgeable of what you want this book to do for you, right? Otherwise, you create something and then you leave the person who you're dealing with without anything. And this is a good thing to do as well, because what you also find when you've written a book and you sold it is that someone will say, I really love your concepts. What's next? And if you don't have that what next, you haven't done your half of the full journey if you really want to help somebody.
Yeah.
So you want to do that. You want to make sure that you have that service underway already. Then the last thing, obviously, and I'll back this up with a story as well. The last thing is you also want to find a way of how do I create a service that this specific person doesn't need to even lift a finger. So I'll give you an example. Here comes someone who is a fitness instructor, right? Or even a fitness instructor. Let's go with that. So this person decides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a book. And that book allows somebody to ensure that they can, within their own space and their own time, get healthy. The next step is that this person loves this book and says, you know what, I need to work with you. So he goes, great. Or she goes, great. What I'm going to do for you is I'm going to create a plan for you, and now you're going to pay for this. Now 200 turns into maybe 5,000, 10,000, right? Because now there's a plan in place. But now this person's like, great, I love the plan that you're giving me, but can we not, I'm struggling to maybe make meals by myself. Don't you have something that allows you to do that? And this person goes, great. What I'll do now is that I will make all the meals for you, and I'll still walk through your journey. So what ends up happening is that the more your client deals with less of the work, the more you can charge them. Does that make sense? I'm sure you've seen this yourself as well. And that's typically when you want to take someone in this journey, from your book all the way to the point where you let this person sit down and not do a single thing. In my world, the book that will be coming out on 30th of November is based on just, book writing and how to actually publish. What somebody will do with that is maybe come to a workshop and maybe want to deal with me on a coaching level. But there are requests now, people saying, Grant, I have no time. What I want you to do for me is write this book for me, ghostwrite it for me. Here's the money, and take it from there. So all I need to do is now sit down and say, what am I going to price that? And what am I going to price every single one of these journeys? And I could talk a lot about this because you're really touching a very, small space in my heart. But you need to also, as an entrepreneur, understand that type of model, because what ends up happening sometimes is that you may look at your model and sit down with somebody and actually ghostwrite the whole book, or give them a service where they're not doing anything, charge them very little for it, thinking that you're doing a lot for them. But in actuality, this person probably has a budget of X amount that they could have actually paid had you known in your mind that this is actually more detached from their work, and therefore I could charge more for this.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing practicality into this, because as you're talking, I'm thinking one of my frustrations, and that's why I'm so gunning at it like the way I am at the moment. I remember I started doing training for banks five years ago,
Mm.
and on the onset, a lot of the time we were doing sales training, and on the onset, I kind of went in there thinking, do you know what? From a sales perspective, you always want people to, you want them to say the right thing. You want them to be able to empower their teams to get up there with the sales.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? How do you step into that moment? And what I then created and researched and found was cultivating confidence. So from an NLP practitioner's perspective, I was like, yeah, there's a state that you can step into, and I approached the call centers with this, and had the most remarkable turnaround in their call center and in their environment because we were cultivating confidence in the sales environment. Track 5 years later, from that point, I sat in front of a board of executives from some association around call centers, and all of them were saying, no, we absolutely love what you're doing, and we're finding that confidence is one of the key ingredients to having success in the call centers. And I'm going, oh wow, I did this 5 years ago already. and today I've got I can't give you like a book or a manual or a video, like a video series to, and it's going, that will never happen again. Like, I'm never going to do it. So now it's a case of going, well, how do I monetize it? How do I get to a point where I'm going, this needs to make me money? And if I'm putting together this training for the next 6 weeks, when I'm finished, I want to take that and kind of monetize it. So everything that I'm doing now is in aim of not only uplifting people and giving them useful content and techniques and processes, but also kind of going, what am I doing right now? Am I monetizing this in 6 months from now? Because if I'm not, stop doing it. Like, that's where my brain's at, because it's not a case of, I suppose people, it comes back to what do you value in life? And for me, like, money is right up there with oxygen.
Yes, same here.
The more money I've got, the more I can do, and the more I can help people, and the more I can employ people. So that's really important to me. But you see, we've already run out of time, but we'll just carry on talking until we're done.
Right.
Where did you find, you must have some moments where you kind of just failed hopelessly, and you kind of got back up and said, you know what, it failed, didn't work, let me carry on. What was the strategy? What did you do to kind of, because like currently COVID, not to mention COVID, but COVID happened. So many people out there kind of go, yeah, it's easy for you to say because you're doing this and this, but essentially we're all affected by COVID. And we all could do with some really useful strategies. What did you do in a time of failure, and how did you get past it?
That's a brilliant question. That's a brilliant question. And I think to answer that question holistically, it's been a journey of actually figuring out how to finally see a failure, understand it for what it really is, being a lesson, learn that lesson as fast as possible, and then move on. But the first big failure that I ever had was, I was a financial advisor and I was doing pretty well. I enjoyed that job, the convincing people to part with their money for bigger and better means. But then what happened was that I had bought a vending machine, right? And there's no better feeling than when you realize that you've created something and somebody pays for it. So I'm inside the cafeteria at that point in time, and somebody walks in and buys a Coke, and I can hear the machine taking in the money, the spirals rolling, and then this tin falls, and this person takes their Coke and they're leaving, and I'm like, that's it. Something inside me just moved. So I decided that I'm going to take this very seriously, and my brother decided to join me on that journey as well. So I left my job as a financial advisor, and at that time they were paying me a salary, and I decided I'm going to go into vending full time. So my brother decided that no, I'm going to finance the rest of the vending machines, and we're off and we're out. Then you realize that vending machine money versus a salary, those are two different things, drastically so. So I made a complete decision just off whim and off a lot of ego, I would almost say, because it wasn't really confidence. Confidence is something that is more of, I've done this before and therefore I can do it again. Then it was just sheer, I just want to jump into something and see what happened. So that for me was my first failure. I was on like my floor for about maybe 3-6 months trying to figure out what next. So I had to finally get back into what we call financial advising again and build myself up slowly. Still left that job, didn't necessarily learn my lesson. Left that job to join a professional speaker at the time that was mentoring me. And we had a business, but that also at the same time fell apart. And once again, I was in that failure space. So the first place was now my vending machine business, which I fell flat on. But then what I learned through that process is that you sit down and you're like, wait a second, if something is going to change here, it has to be me. I can't wait for anything else to change. There's no one that's going to come and say, here's a handout, all the best. Everything comes down to that person you see in the mirror, whether you like it or not. And the sooner you realize that, the faster it is that you actually improve. So with the second time, when this happened, by that time, I already sat down and said, Grant, what's your end goal here? And I think everybody needs to ask themselves that question because we're all going to face hard times. What's your end goal here? And mine was to sit down and say, Grant, your end goal here is to finally become a professional speaker and have masses of audience around you and actually you helping them achieve their goals, inspire intelligently. That is what you want to do. That's your life's purpose. Great. Now that I understand that, what I'm facing here, is it much bigger than that or not? And be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And if the answer to that is yes, it is bigger than that, then obviously from there, whatever it is that's coming your direction, you obviously fail at it, and that's that. But if you have that thing of no, what I have inside me is much bigger than what is going on around me, you will find a way. The question is, when that idea comes to your mind, are you going to jump on it immediately, learn as fast as possible, or are you going to sit back and go, no, that's not it. That can't be it. Because I think we're all blessed with an abundance of ideas, but very few of us actually go out and just execute them and learn from those mistakes as fast and as soon as possible. So now me looking back to the Grant then, for anybody that is facing a difficulty, the first thing is to ask yourself, have I really found my vision in life? And am I going for it? Number one. Number two, is what I am facing much larger than that vision? And if you can answer those questions honestly, you'll find a way out. I don't know what your take is.
I love that. I've been asked that question before, and I've recently done some training around resilience.
Nice.
And when people first ask you, okay, can you put some information around resilience, and like, what is that? What does that look like? What does resilience behave like? And like, how do you bounce back to getting there? And there's so many facets, and really getting your brain on board with where you're going and how you're doing this, and supporting that with your self-esteem and your confidence. There's so many facets to it. So absolutely, I think one of the things I pride myself in is tenacity.
Yeah.
Life beats me down sometimes, and I'm like, do you know what? I'm gonna like check out for a while.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, I will be back, and I will do it better and bigger, and So yeah, I mean, I love that you share. So Grant, in terms of, this is such a fun conversation. We definitely need you back here because we need to talk some more.
I'll be glad.
Absolutely. And the fact that you're a speaker, you have really great insight to share. So tell us, if we want to get hold of you, where do we go? And tell us where we can do that, because people are going to want to know.
Okay. So the simplest way to get me is via my email, gsenzani@thegoldengooseinstitute.com. You can definitely find me there. If not, you can log on to Facebook. We've got a group set up. Once again, thegoldengooseinstitute.com, and you can drop something there as well. But the best place is always via email, that you'll definitely be able to catch me on without any delays with our communication and so forth. That's where you can certainly find me.
Fantastic. So Grant Senzani, guys, if you want to find out more, all this information is going to be in the description box below. And we just want to say we're sorry that Bjorn isn't with us. I know he's not feeling well today, so we've had to do our lunchtime marketing on our own today. But I'm sure he's going to be back next week if he's well enough. He's been taking some pressure. So, but Grant, thank you so much. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for chatting to us. And I'm definitely. I'll see you on Facebook. I want to check it out.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the platform that you've built. I think there's a lot of people that need this, so well done.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to be, this is going to be one of the chapters of one of the books. I'm sure of it.
Love it.
We'll have that conversation. Grant, thanks you so much. Chat to you soon. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers, man. Bye.